this special edition of Rose City Gumbo, remembering Dr. Martin Luther King, sponsored by Rose City Gumbo, hosted by Carl Parker. Today we have a special guest with us, Dr. Raymond Arnold Winbush, an American African scholar and activist known for his systems thinking approaches to understanding the impact of racism, white supremacy on the global African community. His writings, consultations, and research have been instrumental in understanding developmental stages in Black males, public policy, and its connection to compensatory justice, relationships between Black males and females, infusion of African studies into school curricula, and the impact of hip hop culture on the contemporary American landscape. He is currently research professor and director of the Institute for Urban Research at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. Now, Dr. Winbush appeared on Oprah Winfrey's show in 2005. He's written about 4 books: The Warrior Method, A Program for Rearing Healthy Black Boys, Should America Pay? Slavery and the Raging Debate on Reparations. His latest book, or one of his latest books, Belinda Petition, A Concise History of Reparations for the Transatlantic Slave Trade. And then I guess this is his most recent book, is the Osiris Papers. It's reflections on the life and writings of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. It's a discussion by several authors on Black psychiatrist Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and her theory of why there is racism, white supremacy in America or in the world. It was published by Black Classic Press in 2020. So having said all of that, I want to take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Ray Winbush.
Well, I'm pleased to be here, Carl.
We went to college together some years ago, and I'm really proud of my brother here, Dr. Raymond, and his accomplishments. And I'm just thrilled to have him talk to us today about Dr. King. He has been to Portland, Oregon on several occasions. He's been to Portland Community College and other institutions, I think Oregon State. He went there once. And so he's familiar with the Portland metro area and some of other parts of Oregon. So without further delay, let's get into our discussion on Dr. Martin Luther King. There's so much that can be said about Dr. King, as you well know. So much can be said, and we're not going to cover it all tonight, I know. But we can at least begin some of the discussion, some of the dialogue about Dr. King. And one of the things that we know that he was born in January. And in fact, they're going to be celebrating his birth date coming up soon. He was born on the 15th, and he died on April 4, 1968. He was a Baptist minister, we know that. He was an activist who became the most visible spokesperson and leader in the civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. Share with us, if you will, some of your thoughts about Dr. King.
Oh my, that's like picking up an elephant by the tail, but I'll start. I mean, I think just his birth itself, I mean, we could start there. He was actually born Michael King.
Right.
Michael King Jr. to be specific. And his father, Michael King Sr., actually called him that until a few years after his birth, when his father made a trip to Germany and to Europe and really got deep into Martin Luther's whole thing and renamed himself and then renamed his son Martin Luther King Jr. King didn't actually change his name officially until I think 1959 or something like that. But he went by Martin Luther King for most of his childhood.
Right.
You know, when I think of King, Carl, you know, he has to be one of the most important figures in history during the past 200 years, not just the 20th century, because his influence still lives on. I'm amazed that you hear "We Shall Overcome" sung by people in freedom movements all over the world. In South Africa, um, I was in South Africa a few years ago, and there's a street named after him. There's streets named after him all over the United States. In fact, when I need to find the Black community, if I'm traveling in the city, I say, well, where's Martin Luther King Drive? You know, and I know it's always in the Black community. Uh,
Yes.
I think that what we've done with Dr. King is that we've put him so far up in the clouds that he's almost like become Saint Martin. And
Mm.
in fact, J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director at that time, uh, said he was the most dangerous person in America. We want to talk about the gentle, nonviolent, and and I really, don't I like people when they say nonviolent, talk about nonviolent direct action because that's what Dr. King called it. We want to kind of memorialize him, as I've said, it kind of embalmed him on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in 1963 when he made the famous "I Have a Dream" speech. But you asked me some questions and I'll go back and forth on them.
Well, let's look at this whole thing about the holiday, first of all.
Yeah.
And how did we get there to having a Martin Luther King holiday?
Well, we can thank Stevie Wonder for that, believe it or not. It's funny how we sang that song now by, I'm not going to sing it, of course, Happy Birthday to You, Happy Birthday to You. And all of those songs, that song was Stevie Wonder as well as other civil rights leaders pressing Ronald Reagan, of all people, to make his day, his birthday, a holiday. And we celebrated, of course, on the Monday following or usually before.
I think it's the third Monday of the year.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think that it was political. I mean, it's ironic that Ronald Reagan and Bush, his vice president, really were instrumental and they were so conservative. There was a lot of resistance to it.
Yeah.
Arizona, for example, held out to the very end. And one of my friends in the group, Public Enemy, made Chuck D wrote this song called "By the Time I Get to Arizona." Instead of "By the Time I Get to Phoenix," it was called "By the Time I Get to Arizona." And I talked to Harry Allen, who was a member of Public Enemy, just a few weeks ago about that. And he said that after they made that song about Dr. King, they were followed by the FBI. So his legacy, King's legacy, it still resonates throughout history. And I think it will be here long after we're gone.
Now, was King what was he really trying to accomplish in his struggle in the civil rights movement?
Well, there's an old saying that justice is love in public. And that's what Dr. King was trying to accomplish. He wanted justice for American Africans in this country. I mean, you gotta, we were forcibly brought here, stolen from the homeland, endured 250 years of enslavement, another 100 years of Jim Crow. There's always been an element of protest against racism in the United States. Always been. We can talk about Nat Turner, Sojourner Douglas, I'm sorry, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, on and on. What King did was he was able to mobilize people, especially right after World War II, said we're going to deal with this systematically. And what he really wanted to do, as Dr. Welsing said, he wanted to replace racism with justice. I mean, that sounds like a very simple thing, but he said, where there's racism, we want justice. And the United States resisted that.
Now, he was a Baptist minister. So how did he, the whole idea was of being a Christian minister correlate with what he was doing?
Well, that's a very good question, because I think you know, Dr. King was Christianity in action. There were a lot of people that were resisting, you know, that were Christians. I mean, the biggest resistors, of course, were white Southern Christians who they felt that Dr. King was upsetting the natural order of Black people to white people. In 1963, when he was jailed in Birmingham, Alabama, during those demonstrations, he wrote the letter from the Birmingham jail, which is one of the great documents of the 20th century. And that letter was addressed to Christians. It was addressed specifically to the ministers of Birmingham, Alabama, who asked him to leave and asked him what was he doing there. And they were Black ministers and white ministers. Dr. King, of course, responded in a letter that he was in Birmingham because injustice was in Birmingham. But a note on history is that one of the ministers that he was, you know, was against Dr. King being there was Reverend Rice. He was a Baptist minister. And Reverend Rice had a daughter named Condoleezza Rice, who we know as the former national security advisor to President Bush. So, I think that Dr. King really believed what Jesus said, if you want to put it that way. That and Jesus, you know, campaigned against injustice. And so did Dr. King. And it's amazing how the biggest resistors were primarily white Christians, but there was a significant number of Black Christians who were against his movement. In fact, real quick, King at first went to the National Baptist Association, which was the Black, you know, organization for Baptists, because he wanted to prosecute the civil rights movement through the National Baptist Association, knowing that he already had a network of churches around the country. And they told him to take a hike. They didn't want any parts of that. And so that's when he set up the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to prosecute the civil rights movement.
Let's go back for a moment. You mentioned earlier about the former FBI Director, J. Edgar Hoover, and that he considered King the most dangerous man around. And I guess he considered King a radical and made him an object of investigation.
So
and I guess
all the time. Yeah.
Yes. And so I'm just saying, maybe can you share a little bit about what you know in regards to J. Edgar Hoover and his tracking or following King, and why he considered King to be dangerous?
Well, you know, Hoover was an insecure man, first of all. You know, there's evidence, and this is real. I've got a friend of mine who really has done research on this, and J. Edgar Hoover's great-grandfather was Black. There's birth records about that, which is real. So if his great-grandfather was Black and this country follows the one-drop rule that one drop makes you whole, technically you could argue that J. Edgar Hoover was Black, but we ain't gonna go there. You asked me another question. I mean, Hoover had a history in the FBI. Keep in mind, he was FBI director from the 1920s. And he prosecuted the case of Marcus Garvey and had him deported. He harassed A. Philip Randolph during World War II when he had a march on Washington. He saw King as dangerous because, as he said in his notes when he was creating COINTELPRO, which stood for Counterintelligence Program, that spied on Americans that were considered subversive or communist or whatever you want to call it. He said that we had to be aware and afraid of the rise of what he called a Black Messiah that could organize Black people around this country. He was terrified of that. And he saw King able to do that. And he said, I'm going to undermine him. And he did everything he could to do that.
But the thing about it, though, is that King was not just all about Blackness,
Oh, mm-mm.
He was
Well, he was about justice. I mean,
okay.
he was about justice. Again, I mean, if you believe, which I do, that justice is love in public, you know, he was about justice because, as you know, what probably was the straw that broke Hoover's back was when he came out on April 4th, 1967, Dr. King at that famous speech at Riverside Church in New York, and came out against the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And when he
Yeah.
came out against the Vietnam War, people turned against him. The person that was most famous to turn against him at that time was a minister by the name of Billy Graham.
Mm.
He said that he could no longer associate with him. But
Mm-hmm.
within the black community, there were people who turned against Carl Rowan, the famous black journalist, turned against him. So King was for justice everywhere, for all
Yeah.
people. The Poor People's March, what he wasn't able to do, he was organizing at the time of his assassination. It was going to include poor whites, blacks, Latinos, everyone. He was a supporter of Cesar Chavez, who was trying to get rights for Mexican immigrants, you know, and immigrant workers and migrant workers in the West. So, you know, he was for justice.
Justice does not have a color, or it includes all colors, all cultures, all ethnicities.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's why you see King, you know, people forget a few years ago, a couple decades ago, when Poland was breaking away from the Soviet Union, that their theme song during that period was "We Shall Overcome." They were
Right.
all white, you know, in
Right.
the shipyards of Poland, Lech Walesa, but they were singing "We Shall Overcome." That song, they said, is one of the most widely sung hymns, which it originally is, throughout the whole world for justice movements.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, when you think of King, when you think of him, when most people think of him, I'm thinking that they probably think of the "I Have a Dream" speech.
I know. Like, you know why I laugh, Carl? Because it's like we boiled Dr. King down to four words: I have a dream. Just like we boiled Malcolm X down to four words: by any means necessary. These men were far greater than that. You know, I speak before a lot of audiences, and I always ask people, I say, how many of you know who Martin Luther King? Everybody raises their hand. Young people, old people, babies will raise their hand, you know. But then you ask them, how many of you have read anything about Dr. King? Maybe half of them will raise their hand. And then you ask anybody, have you ever read anything by Dr. King? And virtually no one will raise their hand. We don't know a lot about Dr. King.
Yeah.
We do know a lot, but most of us get our information about Dr. King second-handedly.
Right.
For example, I'm gonna just throw out a trivia fact about Dr. King. When he met his wife, Coretta Scott, at that time, he told one of his seminary classmates, "I want to marry a nice Southern girl." He actually told one of his friends that, and she introduced him to Coretta Scott. And Coretta Scott was not interested. She was living down in Alabama, someplace, you know. And Dr. King, he convinced his friend to get the phone number.
Yeah.
So, and she got the phone number for him. Dr. King called her, and they talked on the phone. Coretta, he told her, had never met her in person, but told Coretta, I feel like Napoleon at Waterloo in your presence. And Coretta was swept off her feet. So, and that's how they actually met, you know. Yeah. And I think that you said, well, why is that an important fact about Dr. King? Because I think that he's gone, like I said earlier, to become Saint Martin. He was a human. He was a regular brother.
Yeah.
I posted one of my social media picture of Dr. King. I don't know if you've ever seen that photo of him at the pool table shooting pool.
Right.
Yeah. I didn't know Dr. King shot pool. They act like he was some mythical saint. You know,
Yeah.
but he wasn't. He was a human being. He was a justice warrior. He was a regular brother. He ate fried chicken. You
Yeah.
know, and he loved everybody. He really did.
And I recall someone saying that he would signify. In
That's
other words, he would he'd go back and forth with you,
that's right.
kind of.
All back and play the dozens with you. I mean,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
literally, but he would go back and forth. He liked doing.
yeah,
He was a master of words, just a
yeah,
master of words.
yeah, yeah,
And apparently, if you look at his history, he was winning debate contests when he was 13, 14 years old. He always had that oratorical voice,
yeah,
developed very much when he was at Morehouse College, where he did his undergraduate degree. Did not major in theology, majored in sociology.
yeah,
Didn't
yeah,
decide to become a minister until after Morehouse.
yeah. So what about the I have not the I have a dream speech, but I've been to the mountaintop.
Well, see, those are kind of, like I said, I think that we've embalmed him on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial with the I Have a Dream speech. And most people haven't even read that. I
Yeah,
mean, in that speech, he calls for reparations, something
yeah,
near and dear to my heart. He talks about America gave us a check that bounced. I mean, that's
right.
that rhetoric that he used. And then towards the night before he was assassinated, he made the I've been to the mountaintop. And the reason why he made that speech was because he was flying to Memphis to help the Memphis
Garbage
garbage
workers.
workers.
Right.
The plane that he caught he was delayed to the speech because there was a bomb threat on the plane that he flew from Atlanta to Memphis on, and he had this, you know, kind of premonition, if you please, that he was going to be killed, and that's why he said in the speech that he had been to the mountaintop, and he said all of us would like. He said longevity is a good thing, but
Yeah.
maybe not all of us are there, you know. So
Yeah.
he's a prophetic in that sense that he, anticipated his death.
Yeah. Do you think that maybe we have misunderstood Dr. King?
Yeah, I think we do. I think that we need to read his writings more.
Mhm.
And most of us have not read any books, and he wrote several books.
Mhm.
Um, his last book was Where Do We Go From Here? And I always tell people they maybe
Right.
need to start with that book and go backwards to his
Yeah.
stuff. A lot of people didn't even know there was an attempt on his life by Zora Corey in 1957, or it was either 57 or 59. She was a deranged woman, black
Right.
woman
Right.
in Harlem.
Stabbed him. Yeah.
Right. And Dr. King, in his only he could do, he made a speech about that. The knife was only about a half, not even a half inch, a
And
quarter
he
from
sneezed.
his
Yeah.
right. He said, if I had sneezed, he said, the doctor told me if he had sneezed, he would have been dead.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he made that into a speech.
Right.
So, I mean, leadership like him comes once in a, I'd say it comes once in every, if I were to say the greatest black organizers and men and women of the 20th century, King would be one of them, Malcolm, uh, let's see, who else? Nelson Mandela, Marcus Garvey, Rosa Parks. I mean, he would be in that class.
Yeah. Now, as we look at leaders today, and particularly American African leaders today, would you say
Where is it?
is there anybody like him today?
No, I mean, I don't even hesitate on that question. No. And I'm not going to call any names, but this is the first time in my life that I don't see the national leadership that we had even in the 70s with the Panthers, definitely not in the 60s, but I could go back to the 50s, 40s, 30s to Marcus Garvey, A. Philip Randolph, and I could go really into the early 20th century with Du Bois. And though I don't believe all of what he said, some of it, Booker T. Washington, we have a dearth of national leadership right now in the African community. I would say the most effective black leader that we have right now is Louis Farrakhan, who the media despises, but you know, I can't think of anybody else that could assemble 2 million people in Washington, D.C. on a weekday like he did, you know, 30 years ago, or close to 30 years ago. So, you know, but we lack Black leadership right now. We really do.
Right.
And I'm not saying that Black people need a leader, but I think that the national spokespeople for Black leadership, many of them are compromised. Again, I'm not going to call names. I've met with many of them. They're always concerned about their image. Dr. King wasn't concerned about his image. You know, they're concerned about if they're upsetting people. And Dr. King wasn't concerned about that.
Yeah. So what do you think he leaves for us today? In other words, if we're going to take the baton from him, you know, where are we running to?
That's a very good question, Carl. You know, I think sometimes we've got to ask ourselves, what does Dr. King mean to us personally? If you haven't read anything by him and you only know the sound bites that are on television, you really couldn't even answer that question. What he means to me is that he loved justice. And by, you know, by logic, he loved people. And the love was manifested very, you know, concretely. You know, I think that people now what they should take from him is a love for justice. That includes challenging systems that continue to discriminate against us. I was listening to the news tonight, and I was looking at what I call Senator Turtleneck McConnell, you know, saying depriving the American people of $2,000 and some change. And, you know, a year and a half ago, giving a $1.2 trillion tax cut to very wealthy people. Dr. King would be against that. You know, that's why he wanted to pull together a coalition of poor people with the Poor People's Campaign that he was, you know, he was assassinated before it happened. I think also Dr. King learned very effectively how to join forces with other groups that were fighting for justice. I mean, a lot of people don't know that Dr. King met with Malcolm X in February of '65, right before the Selma March. Right. And he would have marched with Dr. King. So he reached out to people like the then Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture. He reached out to other people, movie stars, musicians. You know, he built a large coalition. And that's something that we can learn today. We got enough Black organizations. And what Dr. King did effectively was organize the organization into a coalition.
Do you think that perhaps this is one of the reasons why Hoover considered him a dangerous person? Because he was drawing people from various ethnic backgrounds together?
Absolutely. And that's why, you know, the worst thing you could be called in the 60s was a communist. It's really interesting now that under this current person in the White House, you know, I've seen T-shirts where people say, I'd rather be a Russian than a Democrat. And how far have we gone when being a communist in the 60s was the worst thing? So Hoover tried to label him that. He, you know, as you said earlier, he surveilled him throughout most of his public life, made up stuff about him.
Yeah.
When I was teaching at Oakwood College, I brought Ralph Abernathy, who was King's right-hand man, to Oakwood to speak. And when I was driving, I'm gonna just say this, and you don't supposed to speak ill of the dead, but Abernathy made a really terrible speech. I mean, let's be honest, it was a terrible speech. So when I was driving him back to the airport, Abernathy said, you know, that was a bad speech, wasn't it? And I lied. I said to him, no, it was good, you know, Reverend Abernathy, that was a great speech. He said, no, it wasn't. I know it wasn't. And he said, I just can't speak like Martin did. And I saw the insecurity that Abernathy
Yeah.
said, and that was used, of course, against Dr. King when he wrote that 700-page book, which a lot of people to this day feel that he didn't write, about Dr. King.
Right.
And Hoover used all of that against him to discredit him. He was terrified of King bringing everybody together.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in 1968, and a lot of people don't know that, he was, people wanted Dr. King to run against Johnson at that time. Wanted him to run against President Johnson, who dropped out, as you know. And
Right.
King said, no, I don't want to deal with politics, you know.
Well, you know, he was a young fellow when he took on the situation there, what, in Montgomery with the bus boycott.
Right, right.
But what was it? A few months before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, there was another person who was a young lady who was Claudette Colvin.
That's right.
A 15-year-old black schoolgirl in Montgomery who
Yep.
refused to give up her seat on the bus,
Right.
and to a white man. Talk a little bit about why the boycott, and whether or not, was it just about being able to sit anywhere you want to on the bus? Was it, or is there more to it?
Oh, there was a lot more to it. I mean, you know, I think Dr. King in that period, like from roughly, I don't know, 1947 to about 1957, you know, Little Rock, that the real reason why the boycott occurred, Montgomery bus system been segregated for years, but the reason why it became to a head because black women were being sexually harassed by bus drivers, by white. The worst thing, and if you ever see those pictures, black women got on the bus in pairs because they were afraid to get on the bus alone because there had been sexual assaults against black women. And the men and women, black men and women of Montgomery were tired of it. Sister Colvin, who was, you said, what, 15 years old at the time, she had refused to get up as well. King, you know, King wanted an older person to be the cause celebre. So he's told, what's his name? Oh, not Vernon Johns. I'm blocking his name, but he was the pastor of the church there. He told him to Nixon, E.D. Nixon. He told him to let's wait until we get an older person. And Rosa Parks, of course, was the person that wound up, you know.
Yeah, because the girl was just a minor, you know, so they didn't want to, you know, get her involved and all that.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And as you know, real quick, Rosa Parks, who was a seamstress at that time, after the Montgomery bus boycott, would last like 380 days or something
85,
like that.
I think it was. Yeah.
85, that
or maybe I'm a little mistaken, but it was over a year.
It was over a year. It was over a year. She had to leave Montgomery because of death threats, and that's why she moved up to Detroit. And later on, of course, started working for now deceased Congressman John Conyers, you know, because she was getting death threats.
Yeah. You know, talk a little bit about King and this philosophy of nonviolence.
Well, you know, King got his philosophy of nonviolence from Mahatma Gandhi, but I'm rereading, you know, Kwame Ture's book, Stokely Carmichael's autobiography now, in fact, Ready for Revolution. And he has this long discussion of nonviolence because, as you know, Stokely was no, you know, quiet person. I mean, he was a phrase, Black Power, him and Willie Brooks. And Stokely says, and I never thought of it, he said we should never use the term nonviolence by itself. We need to use the term nonviolence, NDA. nonviolence direct action, NDA, nonviolent direct action, because he said that nonviolence is a tactic that generates violence in your favor. And so it wasn't, I think when we think of nonviolence, we think of somebody getting hit upside the head, which they did. And then Carmichael goes into this long discussion of Bayard Rustin, who, of course, as you know, organized the March on Washington. And Bayard Rustin was being beat so bad on this bus. He didn't sit at the back of the bus by himself. And these white men were beating him all over the upside the head, bloodied him. And he said, well, you don't have to hit me if you want to. He was real calm and peaceful. But other white people on the bus that witnessed Bayard Rustin getting beaten up, practicing, nonviolent direct, one of them was a white lawyer, and he was in Alabama, and he argued Bayard Rustin's case before the judge, got him out of on bail. And so Carmichael is reflecting on that incident, saying how this was something that encouraged other people to become part of the justice movement. So I think that we need to expand our understanding of what nonviolence means. And that's why, I got to say this real quick. That's why it has bothered me during the demonstrations last summer with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, that I would see young people carrying these signs that said, "This is not your grandfather's civil rights movement." That show, you're absolutely correct. It wasn't, because they only know one side of it, which is Dr. King. They don't know about the Republic of New Africa, the Deacons for Defense. They know a little bit about the Black Panthers, but they tend to think of Dr. King as the only person, and beside Malcolm X, that they knew during the 60s, because they haven't read.
So Martin Luther King patterned himself after Gandhi, who was nonviolent.
Right.
And Gandhi, who did Gandhi pattern himself after?
There's been arguments about that. Some say that Gandhi himself thought about it simply because he knew that, they were trying to throw off the yoke of the British Empire, and he knew that those were the colonizers of India, and he knew that they didn't have enough guns to do that. Right. So he had to think of another tactic. If you go into King's house in Atlanta, there's this huge picture of Gandhi right when that's the first thing you see. So, but there's been debate about did he just come up with the philosophy, or had he read some others? So we don't know the answer to that question, really.
Yeah. Well, and I went back, and I think it is about 385 days, by the way, that the boycott went on. So as we look at King, what can we take away from his life for today? What's the takeaway?
The takeaway that I think we should have is that he was singularly focused on achieving justice for human beings, which sounds kind of namby-pamby, but that's a real powerful thing. If you say, I am going to get justice for people, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, I read today, Tamir Rice in my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, they still haven't indicted. There's no justice. So, Al Sharpton coined the phrase, no justice, no peace. I agree with that. And Dr. King, if he were alive today, would probably be chanting the same thing. I think we got to take away that you have to be singularly focused on dealing with injustices no matter where they are. The one statement from Dr. King that I disagree with, and I'm almost humble when I say this, he said that the arc of the universe bent towards justice. I think I believed that in the 60s and maybe into the 70s. I'm not sure I believe that anymore. I'm not saying, but it was almost like Dr. King was saying, ultimately, there will be justice. And I think, though, if that arc does bend towards justice, human beings have to be engaged in the bending. I don't think justice naturally occurs. I think it occurs with our help. And a lot of us are unwilling to give our help towards movements of justice.
Okay, justice implies that there's injustice.
That's right.
So who's responsible for this injustice? I know it's kind of obvious.
How long you say this program was? I mean, let's start. You want to start at the White House? We can start it. I think, somebody asked me a few months ago, is everyone capable of injustice? And that's a good question. I had to think a little bit about, can anybody do an injustice? Philosophically speaking, I think anybody can. The problem with that Dr. King was facing with what I call institutionalized injustice, when whole systems were, arrayed against a group of people. So I think that, we're all responsible for injustices, but when we allow injustice to occur, when we see it, as far as I'm concerned, what do they say? White silence. What is that saying? White silence supports Black violence or something like that. I think if you see an injustice and you do nothing about it, you're partially responsible for it. And if you keep that in mind, 'cause that's how Dr. King felt.
Yeah. So injustice is systemic, and not only probably in America, but probably in various parts of the world.
All over the world.
But we live in America, so we're gonna deal with America.
I know. I've been in a lot of places in this planet, as they say, and a few years ago I was in Australia giving a series of lectures, and I met with the Aboriginal people. I didn't know about their condition. I knew that it was bad among them, but not to the extent that it was. Do you know, Carl, up until 1925, you could hunt an Aboriginal person like you would an animal with a gun and shoot them for sport, up until 1925. And I told somebody else, look, the only people on earth, and this ain't showing any racist bigotry on my part, but the only people on earth that wherever they went, they did violence, were people classified as white. And as a minority, I think sometimes they act out of fear, and I think that injustice usually follows where Europeans have been. In this country, South Africa, among the Aboriginal people, they'll kill themselves if nobody else is there. That's why if you read the history of Europe for the past 1,500 years, all it is a series of wars. Though. The War of the Roses, the 100 Years' War, this war, that war, and that violence is something that Dr. King was trying to address. And I ain't trying to plug my book, but I think Dr. Welsing talked about why are Europeans so violent.
Well, you can plug your book. Tell us a little bit about your book.
Well, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing was a good friend of mine. I met her by phone in 1978. I was teaching a course at Alabama A&M University, and one of my students gave me this paper called The Cress Theory of Color Confrontation, 8 pages. I had put it on my desk, and one day I got to class early. It was in the evening, and I just picked up the paper. It's only about 8 or 9 pages long, and I read it, and I said, my goodness. And I don't know if you remember, we used to dial 411 for information. That shows you how old I am. I dialed Washington, D.C. 411, and I asked to speak to Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. They gave me the number. I dialed it, and lo and behold, she answered the phone. And I said, Dr. Welsing, my name is Ray Winbush, and I teach at Alabama A&M. And You never have met me, but I just read your article, The Crest Theory of Color Confrontation, and this has changed my life, how I view the world. And she was so happy and very pleasant. And it
Yeah.
started a 40-year friendship that ended with her death in 2016. And so what I did, I wanted to write a book about her, and I assembled people who actually knew her. Reverend Jeremiah Wright, who I knew, and she knew Chuck D from Public Enemy, and each of us contributed a chapter about her. So I just published that book. It came out about 2 months before the pandemic came out.
Oh, wow. I remember seeing a clip on her. It's an old clip
Yeah.
where she was on Phil Donahue.
Oh, yeah.
And she handled herself so well. And she was just, I mean, Phil was poking at her, I guess you could say.
Right.
But she was not falling for it. She stuck right with what she felt and what she believed. And she was quite a woman.
She was tall and stately and was fearless. I've seen people yell at her, scream at her.
Yeah.
She practiced nonviolent direct action with some of the questions that were hurled at her.
Yes.
But
Yes.
she was and what I say in the book, and it's true, she has the only theory. Because you ever ask yourself, why don't most white people don't like black people? Why?
Yes. Yeah. I asked myself that is a question that I have. What is it that makes white people hate black people?
That's another program.
You know, I tell you, I don't know why people hate black people. I don't understand it.
Well, I know why, and that's what is called the Crest Theory of Color Confrontation, where she argues why. And the reason why, I mean, in 25 words or less, is because they are a minority.
You're talking about on the planet. You mean
with
all the world nations
right.
considered.
But they have us calling ourselves
minority, right? Right.
So if you say, what is the minority population of California, black folk will say, oh, Latinos are black. The minority population of California is white people. Same in Florida, same in Texas, same in my state of Maryland.
Yeah.
But we're used to calling ourselves minority. They only comprise about 8% of the world's population. And as a minority, I have a colleague of mine, Dr. Linda Luber at Morgan. She's does a lot of demographic research, and she says if the present rate of interracial marriage and coupling occurs, there will be no white people on Earth within the next 600 years. They just will disappear.
So you think it's out of fear then?
It is. I think that whites act out of fear, but the problem, you can act out of fear by running, or you can act out of fear of confrontation and violence. And unfortunately, they've acted towards us with violence. And this violence is not confined to the United States. It's in South Africa, wherever you see with the Aboriginal people, with Native Americans who were nearly wiped out by these people, settlers, all of that. And then they usually back it up with words that sound like, well, we're colonizing them, or manifest destiny, like in this country, or we're doing what is best for the people that we are oppressing. And that's why, more and more I tell my students, I said, don't just study how Black folk are oppressed, study the mind of the oppressor. And that's what Dr. Welsing did.
Right. So where are we going to take this dream, man? Where are we going to take it to?
Well, I'll take it where Dr. King said it was going. About a year and a few months before he died, it was his Christmas sermon of 1967 at Ebenezer Baptist Church. He said the dream that he had in 1963, this is 4 years after he made that speech, he said the dream he had in 1963 had turned into a nightmare.
Yeah.
So we're fond now of saying, has King's dream been fulfilled? King himself said it hadn't been fulfilled. And see, I always tell people, The only way you can dream is to be asleep. And we need people who are woke. I mean, that's popular among young folk today, but
Yeah,
you can daydream maybe, but
yeah,
I think the white media, they have put that I have a dream speech. They want us to dream. And
right.
dreaming is real. You got to get on the streets, light it up. That's where I feel.
Is dreaming? Dreaming is it's kind of passive, is it not?
It is. And see, with Dr. King, he was dreaming when he said that in 63, because he talks about Chattanooga, the hills of Tennessee. There wasn't integration and desegregation at the time he made that. There is now. So why are we still asking the question, is the dream been fulfilled? Dr. King said the dream was a nightmare.
Yeah.
It just had turned into a nightmare.
So what can we do today? What can you do? What can people who are watching and listening to this program, and what can they do um, to help fulfill or move us forward toward the fulfillment of the dream, or as I might say, the vision?
Right, that's better. I like vision better. I think we can, all of us should be, what Neely Fuller and Francis Cress Weldon called the five smooth stones, a la David in the Bible.
Right.
Replace white supremacy with justice. We need to start doing that. I think when we ever see, if everybody in whatever they do, if they're like Dr. King said, if you're a street sweeper, a janitor, whatever you are, in your little space that, the good Lord has given you, all you got to do is say, in where I am, there will be justice. And if there isn't, I'm going to replace it. If I'm going to replace injustice with justice, that's what we got to do. And that's a big task. It's a big task.
It is. And this whole thing about justice and and beginning to engage in activities that will help bring about the fulfillment of the dream / vision comes from the heart.
It does. It does.
It's not going to come through legislation per se. I mean, you're going to get some benefits out of legislation, okay? But if real change is going to happen, it has to happen at the heart level.
It does, and that's difficult. I mean, Dr. King tried to change hearts, and there were hearts that were changed, but we've seen just in the past 4 years, a president of the United States awaken the worst of the American people, and he's done it very successfully, and they haven't changed his heart. He doesn't comment on issues of justice. If he's a representative of injustice, then Black people in the November election replace injustice with justice by voting against him. And it's not that he's the only container of, racism in this country or in the world for that matter, but we did in action, get rid of him, at least for a time being. And I think that what we've got to do that is in our own, Tip O'Neill, the late Massachusetts politician, used to say, all politics is local. And I agree with that. Sometimes my students say, well, Dr. Wimber, how do you change the world? Very little. But the better question is, how do you change your neighborhood? How do you change? We were doing some research at the Institute and found out that Whole Foods Market, maybe I shouldn't mention their name in this, but Whole Foods Market, none of them in the United States are located in a predominantly Black community.
Mm-hmm.
So then we see the connection between how all these pre-existing conditions that we have, especially during this pandemic, and diabetes, unhealthy, because we don't have access to food, that's an injustice.
Yeah.
So I'd say pick out your thing, go for it, and replace white supremacy with justice.
Well, here's the thing. Dr. King was a Baptist minister. Mm-hmm. He was a Christian minister,
Mm-hmm.
which meant that he obviously believed in some of the tenets of the Christian faith.
He did.
One of them has to be love.
Mm-hmm.
And where there is love, there will be always justice. And you I saw you, you looked up at
Well,
that.
I gotta think about that because I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
Because maybe if you put the adjective true in front of love, I would agree with that.
Okay.
You know,
I'm with you. You mean true love, you're saying?
right.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if we go Bible, we can say how the rich young ruler, and others said, they kind of were bragging about how much they did with people, like, yeah. I want to be a follower.
Yeah.
Okay, sell everything you got, okay? And they said, I can't do that.
That's right.
I think true love, in the presence of true love, because I've heard a lot of, look, there were George Wallace who stood in front of the door of the schoolhouse. He told people that he was a Christian and that he loved Jesus and that Jesus wanted segregation as well as God.
Yeah.
So maybe the adjective true, I would agree with.
Well, see, now we move into a dimension where we talk about Black Christianity, white Christianity.
Right.
Because white Christianity will do what George Wallace did.
That's right.
White Christianity will take people from a country in Africa and bring them over here and subjugate them, and make them slaves, not pay them a wage, not educate them, not treat them fairly. That's white Christianity.
Right.
As we understand true Christianity, it is not like that. Now, I know that there's slavery in the Bible and whatnot and so on, but it's not like it was manifested in the United States of America.
Well, there's a difference between the slavery in the Bible, what is called European chattel slavery.
Yeah.
Colonies were built on it.
Yeah.
It wasn't the same. Right.
Yeah. But I want to go back to your point, because I think it's a good point. He says, what do we do right here? What do we do right now? How do we change our communities? How do we change the world? How do we take the dream and make it a reality? But it has to become a reality in us first, before it become a reality outside of us. Yeah. So how do we do that?
Well, one of the things that Dr. Welsing used to say that I agree with, he said, I'm talking about Black folk now, he said, most Black people are not trying to deal with white supremacy or the system of white supremacy. What they're trying to do is get a more comfortable place in it.
Yeah.
And I think that if you feel that you're removed from racism, all of that, that's you're delusional. Mm-hmm. And so I think that you've got to, like you said, you have to feel that there's something wrong, regardless of what it is. It can be the environment, which is unjustly treated. It can be animals that are unjustly treated. Hopefully you'll see that in human beings that are unjustly treated. You got to do something about it.
Right.
Organize against it. And a lot of people aren't willing to do that.
Right. You talk about, when you look at the dream, you talk about making the dream a reality. Sometimes you have to speak up, and sometimes you have to act up.
That's right.
And when I say act up, I mean you have to demonstrate behaviors that will put injustice in its place.
No, you're absolutely correct. And what if you look at, a few years ago, I was really kind of almost obsessed with this study of how do movements begin, women's movement,
Mm-hmm.
Black movement, abolition, all of this stuff. And around the world, anti-apartheid movement, all of those movements started by social disruption. None of them, it wasn't like somebody came to the president or the mayor or governor and said, we'd like you to change this. It didn't happen like that.
Right.
They may have started off doing that. You know, Dr. King in his book, Stride Towards Freedom, he said something I never will forget. He said when they, during the Montgomery bus boycott, they went to the mayor of the city and said, look, let us ride in the back of the bus, the front of the bus when nobody else is on it. Guy said no. He said, well, let us ride in the front of the bus during holidays. They said no. They said, well, let us ride in the front of the bus when there's seats, but nobody's occupied. They said no. And then Dr. King wrote this one sentence that I never will forget. He said, we decided because they were not going to give us anything, we were going to ask for everything. And that's what they did. So he said, we're going to boycott.
Yeah.
And they did. So I think that Dr. King, you know, he was a social disruptor. I mean, demonstrations, it always gets me, people say, well, they're tying up traffic. They're laying down on the highway like they did this summer. They got this tied up. That's what you're supposed to do with a demonstration. They're approaching Mitch McConnell while he's having dinner in a restaurant. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to make people draw attention to your cause. And the only way you can do that is through social disruption. That's a nonviolent, direct action.
Yeah. So what's next, brother?
Well, let's do another show.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to do another show maybe about white supremacy or how racism has infected this world and will destroy it unless we do something about it, you know.
Right.
I was reading a little article yesterday, and you know, things just click in your mind like others during the pandemic. I've been wearing these little blue masks, you know, that you pick up. And they said, you know, it's like 1 billion of those have gone into the ecosystem, and they're choking sea turtles, and animals are swallowing them and all kinds of stuff. So they said you need to wear a cloth mask. So I said, okay, no more of those. I'm wearing cloth masks every place I go. See, that's a form of justice for animals, you see, and that's justice for the environment.
Yeah.
So there's little things that we need to think broader about, how my behavior affects the rest of us. We're all connected.
Right. And that's a beautiful point that we need to keep in mind, that we are all connected.
We are.
And regardless of ethnicity, regardless of the color of our skin, the education, the lack of education, the money, we're all connected. And the reason why we are suffering in some capacities as we are is because of this selfishness of some people, the pride of some, and the greediness of others.
Right.
You know, so people are greedy, man. They want as much as they can get. You know, we're very proud. We're not humble. So anyway, we're going to do. We're gonna do Black History Month in February. Have you come back?
Yeah, anytime, brother. This is good. This is good.
Yeah. We've been talking with Dr. Raymond Winbush. He's a American African scholar, and and of course he mentioned earlier that we were classmates and roommates at Oakwood College, now Oakwood University, and he's now at Morgan State University in charge of the research there, and he's written 4 books or so, and we're just glad to have you here, Dr. Ray, and we're looking forward to the next chapter where we can touch base again in February.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Okay.
Yes. All right. Now, if people have questions for you, should they contact? Is there a place to contact you, or?
Yeah, on social media, I'm on Twitter at @rwinbush, Facebook Ray Winbush, and believe it or not, I answer my email, which is raywinbush, all one word, @gmail.com.
Okay.
So, and I answer my email too.
All right. Well, good. That way people
give out my phone number. Okay.
No, we won't give that up. But if people would like to touch base with you, they can through those means. That would be great.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again for being with us. Rose City Gumbo. We really appreciate you watching this program today, and we hope that you've been blessed by it and informed.